Hey YouTube, how you doing? I'm Adam Kinzinger. I was a congressman for 12 years, represented the state of Illinois, and an Air Force pilot for 22. So what I want to do is kind of every week or every 2 weeks, just kind of go over a very quick video about what's happened and what to expect this coming week, so we can all kind of stay informed as to what's going on in the crazy world of Washington, D.C. One interesting thing to happen, so Donald Trump has basically put out, all of his tariffs, right? His uncreative tariffs as a way to, in his mind, fix a trade deficit. Trade deficit is when one country imports more from a country than they export to that country. Things like trade deficits mattered in the 80s. For instance, when US car manufacturers were competing with Japanese car manufacturers, and US car manufacturer quality had slipped a lot. I mean, back in the 80s, you were lucky if you could get a car to go to 100,000 miles. Japanese quality was very much improving. So Americans were buying more and more Japanese cars, less and less American cars. And so you had a trade deficit, which is much more importation from Japan than the other way around. So trade deficits mattered then when you were hoping to save and help the US car industry. Today, however, the world is kind of shaken out in a way that's almost not important. Some areas it is a little bit, but not too important. If I go to Applebee's, for instance, I have a trade deficit with Applebee's. Applebee's gives me a product. They give me food. I give them money, right? I've never given Applebee's food, but that doesn't mean that relationship doesn't work. In fact, it works out perfectly. That's what we signed up for. The same is true on world trade. However, Donald Trump, because he got his politics and his theory from the 80s and has never grown since, has decided that he's going to do all these tariffs to try to save the trade deficit. In fact, what we found out over the last few weeks is that the trade deficit has actually gotten worse under Donald Trump. So tariffs not only don't work, they may exacerbate the situation, they may make it worse, or something else happened, but they certainly haven't solved it. So good job, Donald. Didn't really work out that well, but good try. There are times where tariffs are important, though. Things like, when we want to defend some of the things that are important to us, like steel production, for instance, or if, for instance, China is doing unfair trade practices with the United States. But the thing is, you don't take on China alone. You actually take them on with your friends. You build a coalition to take on China, for instance, in that specific area. And instead, what Donald Trump has done is fought everybody. So the United States is on an island, and this has allowed China to actually take advantage of the fact that the world's pissed off at us and actually build their own alliances. This is the opposite of what anybody really wants. Donald Trump, of course, doesn't know what he's doing, so there you go. Tesla, by the way, sales in Tesla in Europe have dropped another 25%. Good job, Europe. Tesla's a great car, but they got a crazy guy in charge, and it's time to replace him. That's what I think. By the way, Elon Musk really didn't start Tesla, just so you guys know. He did skyrocket it, but he wasn't the one that started it. A couple other things. The big, beautiful bill coming out of the House and the Senate. They're trying to negotiate the differences between the House and the Senate. The parliamentarian in the Senate basically forced the Senate to strip about $200 billion or more in cuts from that bill because of something called reconciliation. We won't get too much into that except to say there's a lot of nuances and procedures to get things done that way, but it allows the Senate to pass something with 50 votes instead of a filibuster-proof majority. So now there's going to be differences between the House and Senate. They're trying to work those out. This is a terrible bill, by the way. $700 billion in tax cuts for the wealthy, while then cutting $700 billion from medicine and medical research. This is the opposite of what America needs right now in a $38 trillion debt with a growing income disparity. And I think the vast majority of people in the Republican Party that are voting on this know it's bad. They just cannot tell Donald Trump no. And so they're just going along with it. They are walking off the ledge like lemmings. People who get elected to Congress, to the Senate. Think about this. Politicians that lead. Every congressman represents 700,000 people, unwilling to stand up to one man. I mean, to me, it is absolutely unthinkable and ludicrous. I never could have imagined my time in Congress as being subservient to one man like that. But that's why I'm not in Congress anymore. Also want to talk quickly about the Iran strike and the intelligence. One of the big mistakes Donald Trump made here, I personally thought it was the right thing to do to destroy these sites, but you shouldn't have declared an immediate ceasefire until you know whether those sites are destroyed, because you may have to go back for a second round of bombing to ensure they get finished off. Donald Trump instead that night said they were obliterated because to him, everything is a movie. He saw this movie playing out where Israel and Iran are at war. Israel's doing a good job beating Iran's air surface to air systems and everything. And he wants to come in and be the hero that saves the day and ends the war. So he comes in, he bombs those sites, and in the meantime, the wars maybe shouldn't be over until you figure those sites are done. But he ends it because he wants a good storybook movie. And that's why he's so outraged right now. Because when people are like, hey, what does the intel really say? Maybe it's not completely obliterated. It makes him angry because that's not the end of the movie he wanted. He's a child. He's totally unqualified to be president of the United States. So here's the fact. And as somebody that has sat through intel briefings, that understands how intelligence works, we legitimately don't know yet. All intelligence is taking bits of pieces of information, putting them together, and using your best judgment. And plus, in Fordo, this whole site is under a mountain. It's not that easy to figure out what happened. Now, I think it's pretty severely damaged in my mind because we took out the entrances, and centrifuges are actually really delicate. So it's not like they can just sit there, without access to oxygen for 5 years while Iran digs back in, and they'll be fine. They're very sensitive. And plus, when they stop spinning, they destroy themselves. So we'll see. But the reality is we just don't know. And if any normal president was president right now, they would say the same thing. We don't know. The intel community is figuring it out, and we'll deal with what we need to after that. Lastly, on this short video, just talking about the New York City mayor's race, that sent shockwaves. A young 33-year-old beat Andrew Cuomo. Unthinkable a month ago, thinkable now. There's a lot of lessons that Democrats can take from this. My theory of the case is less about the Democratic Party needs to go far left. Look, the further any party goes, including the Republican Party, the more you alienate people that don't agree with you. And I think, in fact, the Republican Party, though they're in charge now, someday are not going to be in charge and are going to be thrown into the ash heap forever because they're so far out of what most people believe. I do think the lesson out of the New York City mayor's race is youth, optimism, a vision for the future. Get going out to places that not everybody goes to, sometimes going on podcasts that aren't necessarily friendly, being willing to stand in the firing line and doing things differently. I think one of the messages out of this, in almost every election we're seeing, is that the old way of doing things is over and people want new and fresh. And it doesn't really matter where you sit on the political spectrum. If you're giving people optimism and hope and an idea for the future, they'll be happy and they'll reward you with that. So with that, that's generally what's been happening this week. Looking forward for this next week. It's going to be all about the so-called big, beautiful bill. And we'll be watching to see what happens between the House and the Senate and what that ultimately looks like. Be sure to hit like and subscribe to this channel. We've got not just these things coming out, but also a lot of explainers on something that may be happening in the day that's really important, or something that maybe you've always wondered about. In the future, we're going to talk about things like reconciliation or what is the debt limit. So thanks for subscribing. Take care.